I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition. Sometimes adversity leads to a breakthrough, and that is certainly true for my next guest, who took his adversity, created a breakthrough in his personal health, and then extended it to the organization he leads, and now has joined a movement of health that will improve the lives of his community. With more than 35 years of diverse healthcare experience, Todd LaPorte leads an integrated health system with 6 acute care hospitals, numerous outpatient facilities, a research institute, and various community services impacting social determinants of health and military preparedness. Honor Health is Arizona's 7th largest employer, with a presence throughout much of the growing Phoenix metropolitan area. We spend most of our time talking about what is called the Blue Zone movement, conceptualized by a National Geographic journalist who identified attributes in communities worldwide with unusually high centenarians and sought to impart these traits elsewhere. Healthcare is a team sport. Individuals, groups, organizations, and communities all have a role to play in creating long, healthy lives for our employees and community members. Gone are the days that healthcare organizations like Honor Health only treat the ailment. Now, they look at the whole person and work to prevent, not just treat, to focus on conditions of health, not just the disease. The benefits to community are many: increased productivity, lower healthcare costs, and maybe even strengthening families and becoming a benefit for companies to attract new employees. Before joining Honor Health, Todd had senior management roles for an international CPA firm that served Arizona healthcare clients, as well as clients in high-tech manufacturing and consumer services. He was also the CFO of a privately held healthcare company that served more than 500,000 Arizonians. Todd is the current board chair for the Health System Alliance of Arizona, an association of 5 largest healthcare systems throughout the state. He is a member of the Greater Phoenix Leadership, a CEO advocacy group, and is a board member of Experience Scottsdale, a visitors bureau. He speaks frequently to Arizona State University MBA classes and community service organizations throughout the Valley of the Sun. Todd was named CFO of the Year by the Arizona chapter of the Financial Executives International in 2012, and was recognized by Becker's Hospital Review as one of the 125 hospital and health system CFOs to know in 2013. Todd LaPorte on the Business of Intuition. Well, Todd, it's great to have you on the show. And of course, we go way back. I think I've known you since the days of your efforts at Honor Health as a vice president of finance. And then you got pumped up to, or kicked up to being the CFO.
Just when I was a little pup. I was a director of finance, if you can believe it goes that far back.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I remember that. And you got called to the show sooner than you had anticipated.
I did. I had a wonderful mentor, the CFO at the time. And unfortunately, he had a health event that meant he was going to retire sooner than he thought. But we had been planning for that day. Just happened sooner than either of us thought. That's all.
I got it. Well, since I've known you, you've been through a lot. The organization has gone through a combination of things, but one of them was the merger with a West Valley hospitality system, hence Honor Health. I knew that you were originally working with Scottsdale Healthcare. And then we got COVID, kicked us all in the teeth, which was tough. And you guys, I know, went through a lot of trials and tribulations to work through that. And now you're out the other side. And now you've got this new wonderful project that you've undertaken and you've taken a really strong leadership role on called Blue Zone. For those who don't know what a Blue Zone is, what is it, and why did Honor Health decide to take a lead role in bringing this to the community?
So Blue Zones the concept was authored by a gentleman who was a National Geographic journalist, I think with some archaeology background, and he was commissioned to go out and study cultures around the globe where there was an unusual level of centenarians, that the culture had a track record of basically people living really long. And his journalistic discovery was that there were things that were traits of individuals that led to long lives, but that it was also that there were sort of built-in environmental reasons, community reasons why such a high predominance of folks in a community would live long. And so through those studies, he kind of put together the stories of what were the common themes, both on individual attribute level as well as community attribute level, and told a story. Then what happened was he then wanted to in essence, extrapolate those ideas out and make a wider impact. And he created an organization that, in essence, wanted to teach those things to other communities and to other people, and ultimately created a very organized certification process that a community could go through, where there was a portfolio of tactics that had worked in some of these other communities that he thought then could be offered up to new communities, and that then through a 5-year certification process, get to a place that they could characterize themselves as a Blue Zone. And so, but there's more to the story in that on a personal level, about a decade ago, I had a cardiac event. I had a heart attack, and it caught my attention. And strangely, I told myself I was going to make that the best day of my life. It's very complicated why I ended up doing that on a personal level, seeing the impact that my heart attack had on my children and my wife. I realized, wow, I need to turn this into a positive. And so that led me to get introduced to Blue Zones. It was about two or three different resources that I was directed to that was thought could be helpful to me in my recovery. And so I got introduced to Blue Zones. And it really resonated with me. I mean, it talked about things like, we all know, right? Good nutrition and physical activity. But it reminded us about things like a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, the importance of fellowship, and things like that. But it did open my eye up to also that I was going to need to be very proactive, right? That this stuff about good health doesn't happen by accident. You have to really, go after it and have good strategies. And really, that's what Blue Zones is all about. Rather than just leaving the health of a community up to chance and sort of passively just sit back and let it happen, how can we as a community actually create policy and have practices, have infrastructure, have tactics inside our community that can destine us to be a very healthy community? So on a personal level, I got introduced to Blue Zones. Then on a professional level, I had heard about it. And it's like, wow, that fits with where the mission of Honor Health is really at and where we're going. And in a nutshell, Dean, this mantra that we're not going to just treat people with acute care needs on the back end, we're going to actually engage with them and help them with good education and through healthy choices, sort of be well on the front end. And strangely, maybe even not need us on the back end.
So that's working your way out of a job.
Absolutely. Let's obsolete ourselves. And but we have sort of a new value proposition that we offer to the community. And I'd say it's the combination of how do we help people stay well and be well, but also if they have the chronic diseases, acute needs that need expert medical talent to help them with, we're there for that too.
So that's a very different model based on our traditional fee-for-service model. I break a leg, you go fix it. That downstream, I need you when I need you, but I don't need you when I'm healthy, right? You're actually getting upfront, upstream around that with Blue Zones. And it sounds like it's sort of the extension of what used to be maybe called population health management. It's that larger perspective of we need to take care of helping people get healthy and maintain their health. So I know that there's probably is there 9 different pillars within the Blue Zone? You mentioned some of them around movement, around your purpose, mindfulness, which I know is a big topic, diet, family, I think a sense of belonging.
You forgot the one that everybody loves, and that is
wine a day. A glass of wine a day, yeah. I think, everybody who loves a good red wine probably is cheering on that one. So this is just for Scottsdale, is that correct? You partner with Scottsdale, the city. You've also got other key partners. Why Scottsdale? One could argue it's needed in other areas of Maricopa County in Arizona. Why Scottsdale?
No question, the entire community, Maricopa County, state of Arizona, United States of America could benefit from the discipline of this certification process and all the tactics that go with it. However, the reason we decided to scope it for just Scottsdale as our starting point is that the elements called the critical success lead indicators were in place. It's very important that the local municipality leadership embraces what the project would entail. It's very important to have a health system like us to embrace it. It's very important to have some of the school systems to embrace it, the community leaders to embrace it, and the judgment by both the Blue Zones organization and by Honor Health in our stepping forward as an anchor sponsor, along with a couple of other really fantastic partners. The reason we had the confidence to move forward was that we felt like those elements were in place, that there was a commitment by what would be some of the key stakeholders and that would be necessary in order to actually execute. There are tactics that relate to different sort of stakeholder groups. There's just the general public policy effort. There is a standalone certification process, for example, for worksite. Honor Health is actually engaging in a certification process for just Honor Health, apart from, say, the general community effort. There's a track for schools, for faith-based organizations, for grocery stores, restaurants. The moral of the story here is it truly takes a village. And so we felt Scottsdale was ready, if you will, to quote unquote pilot this. We're hopeful that this will extend throughout Honor Health's entire service area. And we do service much more than Scottsdale, very clearly kind of stretching to Central and North Phoenix. And we look forward to when we can do that. It'll mean bringing new stakeholders to the game, but we're hoping that with the success we can demonstrate in Scottsdale, everyone will enthusiastically embrace it.
So if I'm living in a small, remote island off the coast of Italy, and that has been one of those blue zones that sort of was the indication of, my gosh, we got a lot of centenarians here. What's going on? Oh man, it's their diet, it's their relationship with all the generations and physical activity and all the other things that go along with it. So we could say, okay, move there, take on that particular set of behaviors, and your chance of living might be increased, right? What will somebody in Scottsdale experience in the future relative to the work that you're doing with Blue Zones that they're not experiencing now? How will they actually receive that benefit? What's it going to show up for them? I mean, you can't make a promise of people living longer, but what can you say would be some of those outcomes that a resident of Scottsdale would feel in, say, 5 years?
So it's a Thursday. I start my day where I wake up. I want to go for a bicycle ride. I get on my bike. I want to go visit the Museum of the West in downtown. And they have a nice setup for me where there's bike racks that I can set my bike at. In fact, there's a really nice bike path that I can take on my way to that destination. I'm able to have access to food markets and good food choices. It may be that in parts of our community, there are food deserts. Some places are better than others. Maybe we have more consistency. There's more attention drawn to make it easier for things like our green belts and going for walks. It'll be things like, you know what? I'd love to connect with others in my community. I feel socially isolated. I can volunteer. I could volunteer at Honor Health, right? And help us with greeting some of our guests and feel connected to Honor Health employees and Honor Health patients and families. Perhaps I'm a concierge in effect at one of the local hospitality resorts where I can help welcome people to the city, maybe even help them know how to get around. And so it'll be more things that focus on how to encourage the activity, encourage good nutrition, and create fellowship and sense of belonging. So the opportunities are endless, Dean.
Yeah, that sounds great. So it reminds me, Todd, of something I read a while ago that I think is still in place. In Bhutan, they were trying to figure out how to make their people happy. And so in our country, with our economics, we have the gross domestic product, the GDP. What they were trying to do is measure happiness in that country. And so they knew that they couldn't guarantee happiness, but they maybe could create the environment by which, if we could have this particular set of policies and opportunities, that would set the stage for a person to potentially be happy. And there's obviously so many different benefits for happiness when it comes to health and marriages and violence and all the things that go along with that. So it sounds like in some ways, Blue Zone is sort of in its own way creating that environment for people to be healthy in a way that maybe wasn't there before as much.
Absolutely. Listening to the author Dan Buettner talk about even crazy techniques, like they encouraged in one city restaurants to, rather than default when people went to get a hamburger and had to have French fries on the side, they actually convinced them to make the default side be fruit. And then if somebody asked for French fries, of course they would provide it for them. Yeah, they made the default be fruit. And it was funny how after a while, many people just simply got used to fruit being their side.
That's really good.
So it's all these like little techniques that how could we help people sort of nudge them into some better practices?
That's a great point. I was married once before. My wonderful wife, Joanne, we've been around for 28 years, but I had a short training wheel marriage, as I call it. My wife at the time, her father had a heart attack. You kind of just shared your story. And I remember going to the hospital to go visit him. This is somewhere in Illinois, outside of Chicago, I think. And so I'm hungry. So I go to, the place to get some food, and all they had was greasy food and hamburgers and French fries. There was nothing healthy. And I thought, man, this is ironic. Here I am going to visit my then father-in-law for a heart attack, and all the food that they have to present to the rest of us are foods that are not conducive to health. I just saw the irony, but you're saying that those are some small little, almost subliminal things that will help people make better decisions.
Absolutely. And of course, rooted in some of this is just better education. It's really sad where there's some young people, right, that, there's a real issue with childhood obesity. And these young people don't want to be in that situation. And there was a really interesting documentary I saw as part of my cardiac rehab. And it was called Fed Up. And it was produced and narrated by Katie Couric. And there was a young lady whose sort of life they followed, where she was trying so hard to get control of her weight. And she was being so careful about what she would eat. And she would have cereal, but she'd try to have smaller portions. But she was eating all the wrong things. And it's because, like so many Americans, many of us eat 80% of our food is coming from our pantry and only 20% from our refrigerator, when it ought to be exactly the opposite. We should only be dipping into the pantry 20% of the time and into the refrigerator 80%. But that's not, you got to be educated to know about that, right? And so there's so many people who are, quote unquote, trying to do the right thing for their health, but honestly don't understand that the normal patterns of society are leading them to some really bad habits. And I think, and that's just one example, but I think we can help a lot of people by creating awareness. And then, yes, some of the infrastructure and policy.
Yeah, you mentioned food. It's such an important piece of all this, that the kind of food that we're given in the supplements that sometimes we're given would not be even allowed in other countries. And so there's a certain amount of, that's all that's available. I'm going to eat what I'm going to eat, and yet it's not necessarily healthy for me. Pivoting a little bit, I'm beginning to read a book right now called Together by Vivek Murthy, who is our current Surgeon General. You know about this guy. Got a great book called Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World. Certainly, COVID has sort of obliterated our ability to connect with each other, and we're now kind of coming back a little bit. But, for a certain period of time, we couldn't even be 6 feet from each other, let alone see the full expression of a person's face because of a N19 mask and so forth. So, and then we've got, technology and kids spending so much time on their phones, and adults as well. We're highly connected, and yet the loneliness factor is going up and up and up. And his point is that, loneliness and disconnection from people is a health issue. It's not just something that's a mental health issue. It's a health issue. And he cites a couple of things, one of which is to say that loneliness and isolation is equivalent to the physical body of actually smoking 16 cigarettes a day or having 6 strong cocktails a day. So it has a real effect. And I know in my own life, I told you my story. My mother recently passed. When she left visiting us, she went right into quarantine for a year, not really being able to see any family outside of the people who were there in her assisted living. And I know it had a huge effect on her longevity. I think that she went into a spiral because of the fact that she was disconnected. With that as a backdrop, how does can Blue Zone be really successful in an environment where we are so focused on technology for our interconnection? How do we encourage people to get back to the face-to-face and in tribes? I mean that in a positive way, in families. What do you sense or hope that Blue Zone will do relative to that part of those pillars that have to do with relationships and connectivity and intimacy and vulnerability?
Dean, it's because there are now these sort of social phenomena that are undermining, if you will, that ability to connect in a very personal way, as to why it's so important that we engage with purposeful activities like Blue Zones will promote. Let me give you an interesting stat. About a month ago, I had asked our HR function to give me a recap of where we're spending our money in our Honor Health self-insured medical plan. What are the conditions that we are treating for our workforce? And if you can imagine, we have, maybe 13 to 14,000 employees, not all of which are in the plan, but many of which are, who have dependents as well. And let's just say, for rounding figure, that we are serving somewhere around 20,000 people as members of our self-insured medical plan. And then if I told you that 950 of them in 2022 were being treated for depression, and the average cost for each of those individuals for an annual cost to Honor Health was $14,000 per person. And then if I told you we were treating anxiety, about 750 members, of which the average cost was around $12,000 to $12,500 a year. If you do the math, that's around $20 million a year per hour treating depression and anxiety in only our workforce and dependents.
And it's interesting that you mentioned just a small percentage of people out of your entire number of employees.
You know what? Actually, I was told that we benchmark reasonably well as a percentage of our workforce, but it still doesn't change the fact that there are that many people, and the cost when they are afflicted with those issues is a tremendous burden on society. And so in fact, that's some of the promise, the return on investment to a Blue Zones. The Blue Zones folks have told us that they anticipate for our work in Scottsdale that we can make a $600 million economic impact over a 10-year period.
Wow.
That between about $200 million of it from reduced medical benefits or from medical costs, and about another $400 million from improved productivity. And that the sum of all that, of course, makes for an economically more vibrant community as well, right? This is all sort of intertwined. And so if we can improve the health of individuals, we can improve the economic health of the community.
Have you seen or have you heard other communities who have been through this process being able to encourage people to move into their communities, in part because, yes, we've got good schools, we've got affordable housing. Oh, and we're also a Blue Zone community. Are people catching on to it? Do people move?
I'm expecting it could be differentiating. I know that there are stakeholders like Experience Scottsdale, which is the destination marketing organization that the city of Scottsdale contracts with to help, if you will, sell Scottsdale to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. I know they're very interested in the work that we're doing here. They've been engaged with some of our early focus group activity. So I think there's an I know that the city is hopeful that that would be the case. I know that Experience Scottsdale is. I can tell you that my due diligence before engaging with the Blue Zones organization was I spoke with the CEO of Texas Health Resources, which is the largest healthcare system serving Fort Worth, Texas. And it's actually a much larger region than, say, Scottsdale proper. But, Dallas, Fort Worth, Phoenix, fairly similar type urban areas. Fort Worth, at the time, before they engaged in their certification process, was through an evidence-based index, was just barely a top 150 healthiest city. 7-8 years later, after having been through their 5 years of purposeful tactics, got to being a top 50 healthiest cities. Think about that. That a city could move that far inside of a decade is amazing. So I think that's the hope. Now, Scottsdale's not starting out quite as dramatic as 150. Arguably, we're maybe more in that 65 to 75 zone. But frankly, we're setting a goal to be in the top 10.
Wow. That's your goal?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
And let's aim high. But we hope that compels us to drive the behavior that gets us there.
Todd, who else are other organizations that are pillar supporters of this?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because I really want to call them out. Tim O'Neill, who leads Goodwill Industries, has just been a kindred spirit goodwill is much more than just what maybe the community sees in terms of the sort of the retail or the consignment of goods that people donate. And I mean, they are very much engaged with social services. They have a really cool sort of subsidiary effort called Empower, where they are educating folks to be in a position to learn skills and trades that they can actually be empowered to go to work. And the greatest value of it, more than anything, forget the productivity to our, inside the economy's workforce, it's raising these individuals' self-esteem. So Goodwill they have a vision that is very in sync with ours. And so they have joined us as an anchor sponsor. The other is Cigna. Cigna is the health insurer for the city of Scottsdale. Their objective has always been, in working with the city, how do they help the city's employees be healthier? But now let's take this even further and let's help the entire city, the whole community, be a healthy environment. So we have two great partners in Goodwill and Cigna, and there are others, but they are two anchors.
Got it. And then what would the individual, what could they do? You said very early on that it takes a village to make a village healthy. You got some really wonderful partners. You got the city, you got Goodwill in Central Northern Arizona, you got Cigna and others. So if I'm listening to this and I'm going, hey, I want to know more about this, or I want to know how I can take more ownership over my own health, what would you do? What would you point them to? How could they take some of those initial steps?
So we're still sort of sorting out some of the logistics, but I can tell you that Honor Health has taken the northwest corner of its campus, where frankly we've had a building that's really been unutilized, and we are converting it to being the basing of the Blue Zones effort to the community. I mean, right along Scottsdale Road. It's near Brown and or 2nd Street and Scottsdale Road. And
you're talking about the Osborne campus?
On the
Osborne those who
campus.
Know so near Old Town Scottsdale.
Yeah, it's where an old auto parts building used to be back in the day, and it's just been sitting there, frankly, unutilized. We're converting that into the office administrative space for Blue Zones, and where it can sort of be a public facing. So ultimately, people will be able to go there and find out more about what's going on. We'll have lots of updates from our own Honor Hub, our own website, and then the Blue Zone, the Focus Project, they will be getting word out in lots of different ways to invite people to engage in activities, engage in some of the tactics, but also how to even be a part of the effort to execute. So I think more to come on all the different places to connect into, but just know we will have a physical facing on the Osborne campus, as well as people could seek more information just through the Honor Health website.
That's great. And you've also got, obviously, I think today's the day. Today's what is the 30th of August? Is it today the 30th? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Tonight is Netflix is actually producing or going live on a documentary on Blue Zones. And so this may air much later, but those of you who are listening in, look for that. You can get some great information there. And then also there's a few books on Blue Zone, not only just in terms of the movement and the process, but even some Blue Zone cookbooks. Am I correct on that?
That is absolutely correct. This Netflix series that's going to be aired is going to unveil a 6th Blue Zone city. There was an original 5, and the 6th city is Singapore. And
so
really? We'll hear more about their culture. And that's what's kind of cool about this too. I was actually a dean in a diversity, equity, and inclusion forum, that kind of a town hall, if you will, with a couple of colleagues this morning that was webcast out to our entire workforce, but then had some live people from this site that we were airing from. It was actually at our Sonoran Crossing medical campus. And it was so fun because the concept of blue zones really dovetails very nicely with diversity, equity, and inclusion, because both of them at their roots is about celebrating culture. It's about celebrating community, about inspiring community. You know, I actually had a leader of another organization, ironically, call me today. And he said, how could we get involved with this? I'm hearing a buzz. Gee, how might we get involved? And I said, you know what? We'll find a place. Hang with us yet. We're into some organizing activities, but hold on to that thought. But it's one of those things that it incites an excitement about making. Yeah. But he said, Todd, we've wanted to do it, but it has always seemed so daunting because we know it takes so many to come together to make it happen. And he said, good for you guys for just stepping out and being conveners. And I said, that's all we're going to be. We're going to be conveners. We cannot do this on our own. But by gosh, we're all going to start somewhere. And I can sense that this is going to be contagious and it's going to keep attracting more and more interested parties.
Yeah, and I just think I was so excited for you guys when I heard about this. You know, our relationship goes long and deep, and the what it does for you as an organization in terms of just differentiating you from other healthcare organizations is certainly not the purpose, but it's a great side benefit. I'm always curious, you know, thinking about the fact that this is a community-wide effort, that I think that there's something also to be said for what can I do to be able to make myself more healthy? Yes, we want to learn more about blue zones, but is there something I could do tomorrow, today, to start taking more proactive role in my own health? You know, and I think that there are ways to do that. There are steps, there's resources that you're going to be able to provide them. But I think anybody that's listening to this is to say that there is a lot of research, a lot of resources out there to start taking some action and to use to be able to be more proactive in one's mental and physical health. Let me finish this.
You know, Dean, let me make. Go ahead. If you had asked me 10 years ago that I could weigh 40 pounds less, that I could turn around among a portfolio of 10 to 12 various lab test scores that were characterizing my health, if you told me I could be where I'm at today 10 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. And so it's not a snap your fingers, but it's possible. And that's why I'm so excited, right, to promote that kind of thinking, that we may not be where we want to be on all fronts, but by gosh, we can get there if we put our mind to it.
You know, it just read my mind, because I was going to ask you, what did you learn during those days right after your heart attack that leads you to your understanding of blue zones? And you just answered it. It is possible. It isn't a snap of a finger. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's a decision. It's an intention. It's taking some actions, moving in a positive direction.
And there was one other important learning that I think could help motivate people. I was so stuck on this concept of servant leadership that, by gosh, I was going to work hard for others. And by the way, I still believe that. I still feel that I've been, like everyone, we've been blessed with certain gifts. We should use them, and we should avail them for all of our neighbors and friends and people around us. But there's this story where I was in my hospital room recovering the evening of. I had 4 daughters around me. My wife was there, and I had one daughter say to another daughter, "All right, Dad, from now on, we're going to make sure you do this and this and this." And the other daughter says to the one daughter, "Get off of Dad's back. Can't you tell he just had a heart attack?" I have another daughter who then says to that daughter, "She's just trying to help." And so the family fight breaks out. My youngest daughter, who's to my right of my bed, starts crying. And she says, "Dad, I'm scared." And it was at that point that I realized I didn't have a heart attack. 5 other people had a heart attack right along with me. And so a huge motivator for me has been coming to the terms that it is not selfish to take care of ourselves. It is how we express our love to the people that we love.
I don't know what else I can say. I think you just had the best way to end this conversation. Brilliant.
Dean, thank you for creating a forum like this. First of all, I love talking to you.
I know.
But second of all,
I do too. We've been down a path together ever since those days of you being a controller, and it's been an absolute honor to watch the progression of your leadership, go through different stages of the organization, your own leadership, and then you now at this level being able to really expand who Todd is and what he believes into the community. It's where I've always seen you, and here you are.
Well, so in the spirit of having a sense of purpose, I think the reason I'm still on Earth, I think the reason I got overtime is because I'm supposed to encourage others that they can make a positive impact on their lives. That power resides within themselves. But also, as a leader of an organization, I realize there are things that as a community we can do also to make it easier for the people who are inside our 4 walls. And so our organization is going to be a part of trying to help do that.
And with your leadership.
Hey, thank you so much for the time.
You bet. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.